Good evening, everyone. I'd like to add my welcome to this presentation of Life in the Tower and Beyond. A particular thank you to Sheila and Philip George for arranging this evening. As you've heard, both of them, in fact, are very experienced ringers, so over a century of ringing experience between them, and both are very practiced teachers of ringing as well, and have taught many of us around the village, for which we're very grateful indeed. So with 50 years plus of ringing experience, mainly here in Gt Gransden, they are absolutely the people to ask any questions that you have about ringing in general and the tower here in particular. So please ask lots of difficult questions of Philip and Sheila. I'm sure they would welcome that. So Philip, I'll hand over to you now and to the presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Sheila, and welcome to everyone. It's lovely to see you. It's amazing. I haven't spoken to this many people online before. It's quite intimidating, but I'm going to share my screen now. We've got, it's a PowerPoint presentation with slides, and we've got about 5 video clips to show you. When we come to the video clips, there might be a bit of a pause because we're transmitting this from 2 locations due to the broadband speed. So I apologize if there's any pause. I'm just going now to share my screen and start the PowerPoint presentation. You just bear with me. Come along. There we are. I hope you can see this okay. Right, anyway, I learned to ring in the mid-60s, so I suppose you could call me a bit of a time traveller. And Dave has explained that Sheila and I have got a lot of experience in ringing. I learned to ring at St. Neots, and when I first saw bell ringing, I was fascinated by it. And I've been ringing ever since, and it's one of the best things I've ever done. I started ringing in Gt Gransden around about 1972, and have been steeplekeeper here for a number of years. And my responsibility as steeplekeeper is to maintain the clock and the bells, and to make sure the tower is a safe place to be. And I'm assisted by, in this job, by David and other ringers. Our church bells haven't been rung for over a year now, fully, and as we hope to come out of lockdown in the coming months, we wanted to share our experiences in the tower and show you what actually was in there. Most church towers are very similar, but in a way everyone is unique. So we're going to give this virtual tour. Probably most of you haven't been in a church tower, so I'm hoping this is going to be new for you, and I hope you find it interesting and entertaining. We're going to go into each room of the tower, starting from the bottom. So let's have a look at life in the tower and beyond. I'll just begin briefly with a couple of snippets about the church history. The church was built around about 1460 in the Perpendicular style, and probably built by the then Duchess of York, and who by marriage and descent belonged to the families of Clare and Mortimer. In 1293, Elizabeth de Burgh inherited the estates of Clare in Suffolk and property in Gt Gransden. She became Lady Clare. In 1326, she bestowed large gifts to the University Hall in Cambridge and refounded it under the name of the House of Clare. And much later, it became Clare College. And so this is our connection with the college to this day, and they remain our patrons. The church itself is worth a visit for its own sake, but we're not going to tour around the church today, but I will just mention a couple of things. One is we've got a very colourful and wonderful memorial window dedicated to the Royal Canadian Air Force 405 Squadron, who flew out of Gransden during the Second World War. And we also have a memorial. I hope you can see my pointer on the left-hand side. This memorial slab is to Thomas de Newson, who was our 3rd rector between 1301 and 1328. So that's probably the oldest artifact that we have in the church. It used to be in the tower on the wall inside, and it was moved when we had the screen put in. The church is open every day during daylight hours, so if you're able to, please visit it. So this picture on the left is the typical view you would get on entering the church, and you can see the tower arch screen, which was put in 2004. And as we enter the door in the screen, we come to a small turret stair here, and 12 steps up, and we come to the ringing room. And as you're going into the ringing room, this is the first glimpse of that room, and you can see the screen there, you can see the other side of it, and you can see the bell ropes hanging down. We used to ring from the ground floor, just by the font, and we were separated from the church by big red heavy curtains. It was a very cold and dark place to be, but nevertheless that's what we were used to. And occasionally we'd peer through the curtains into the church thinking that we'd heard voices, but we never ever saw anybody. But even visitors coming to the church used to hear voices as well and look through the curtains. So it was our friendly visitor. So we'll go up into the ringing room now. And this top photo is a panoramic view taken from the west window. It was designed in 2004 to be bright and welcoming. Traditionally, bell ringers have been out of sight and out of mind, and not much comfort afforded to them. But when we built this, we wanted to be comfortable, and we wanted it to be a light and airy place for people to come and be welcomed. So we've got some nice heating in there and some relatively comfy chairs. And so it's a nice modern environment, a far cry from dusty, dark ringing rooms, which we had to endure many years ago. And in here, we're able to keep our memorabilia, our notice boards, our training books, our certificates, and our planning boards, and so on and so forth. Visiting ringers and other visitors to the room often comment how lovely it is. Indeed it is, and that's what we want it to be. And these other views on this slide just show different aspects of it. And you can see the ropes, the bell ropes, hanging down from the rooms above. They're actually suspended in the safe position in these pictures. We enjoy lovely views into the church. If you look at the top slide, the top photograph, you can just see through the reflection the chancel screen, and we stand discreetly at the screen during weddings and watch the ceremony before ringing for the wedding after the ceremony. It's a privileged position to be in, really. Here's some further pictures, and this time this is of ringing in action. We have 6 bells. The heaviest is 678 kilograms, which is in old money 13.5 hundredweight, and the lightest is 400 weight, which is 219 kilograms. Each person, as you can see here, rings 1 bell, but most of us can ring all the bells. Some of the bells are a little bit heavy for some people, but most of us can ring all of the bells, but we just take it in turns to ring different bells at different times. We usually ring for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Then we change bells and we change the method. And a method is a set sequence of changes with varying levels of complexity. They have to be learned and memorized. We don't allow any aide memoire, so to speak. And ringing is quite a technical activity. A little bit more of that later. The picture on the right-hand side in the middle shows 3 of us wearing masks. And during the lockdown last year, we were allowed to ring on particular occasions, but we had to social distance. So in our tower, that meant we could only ring 3 bells, or if we had 2 bubbles of 2, we could ring 4. Even then, we could only ring for 15 minutes at a time. So it wasn't really very good, but we at least made a sound, but we weren't able to practice or do any additional ringing. So the bells haven't been fully rung for over a year. And to take its place, we've been ringing on Zoom. We've been meeting every week on Zoom and using programs, a program called Ringing Room to do our bell ringing. It's not the same as real life ringing though. As well as ringing for church services, we ring for village events such as revelers performances, and for national events such as remembrance, jubilees, weddings. We'll ring for any opportunity that we can, which causes cause for a celebration or to commemorate a particular event. As ringers as well, we also go to other churches. We visit other towers on their practice sessions. We go on outings to different parts of the country. And sometimes we ring what are called quarter peals, which are longer set pieces of ringing, which last about 45 minutes. You'll notice the picture at the bottom in the middle there is a little bit of detail about one on our planning board. And you can see in this particular case, we were obviously planning a dinner. I think this must have been a Christmas dinner. Our planning boards are very important for us so that we know who can come when, who will do what, and where are we going to go. So now we're going to have a short video. This is about a 30-second video, and it's a clip of some ringing. And in this case, we're ringing call changes, which is when the conductor instructs ringers which bells they have to ring after. I hope you get an idea of this. Patience. Sorry about the delay. Right, okay. So you'll have heard the conductor, which was Sheila, calling instructions, telling which bells to follow which. The conductor is one of the ringers. It's not a person that stands out and conducts from outside the ringing. You're actually part of the ringer. So it's not conductor in the conventional music setting. We can't make the bells sound any louder or any quieter. And we can't change the speed at which we ring. But the conductor is in charge of the piece of ringing and can instruct people whether they're perhaps ringing incorrectly or not. You'll see the rope here. This is called the sally. This woolen piece is called the sally, and the end of the rope is called the tail end. And we'll show you in a moment how the bell works. I'm changing slides, but there's a delay. Bear with me. There we go. Sorry to keep you waiting. Okay, training and learning. It takes about 6 one-hour sessions, I suppose, to learn to handle a bell confidently. It varies on the person. It takes longer, however, to control a bell. After all, we've only got a floppy piece of rope and we're swinging a lot of metal about upstairs. So it's quite a technical thing to do. For training, we use silenced bells. And that means that we can ring a bell, so to speak, without disturbing the neighbours. Before a ringer learns to ring, they're given a tour of the tower so they can understand what a bell looks like and how it works. And you can see from the centre picture here, we've got a monitor in the tower which shows the bells, and we can see them being rung when we're ringing in the ringing room. To train ringers, we have approved trainers, and all the leaders in the tower have been through safeguarding training and have got appropriate DBS certification. These pictures show the use of a simulator, which is one of the main tools we use when we're teaching people. Once a person has learned to handle a bell and they go on to controlling it, they have to be able to make the bell speak at exactly the right time. So we use this simulator, or a sim as we call it, which is a device that transmits signals from the bells as they turn, and they make a sound on the laptop, which, as you can see, is down here in the ringing room. We've got a software program called Able, and the program can ring anything we want it to, and we can select the bell we want to ring. And we start off, and the computer just joins in with us and enables us to keep the bell rung in the right place. It's a really good tool to help us listen and understand what we have to do to control the bell properly. We run these practices 2 or 3 times, about once a week, with people, 2 or 3 people. And in 2019, we ran 43 sessions. We also do a lot of talking to discuss the technicalities about ringing. So on the left here, you can see Georgia ringing the sim whilst watching the monitor. Hazel seems to be very pleased with what she's just done on the sim. And on the right-hand side, just illustrating 4 bells being rung, but they're silenced. And a typical view of the laptop screen when we're ringing. The training scheme we operate is a national one, run by an association called the Association of Ringing Teachers, and Sheila and I are full members, and we've been trained to teach bell handling and elementary change ringing. It's a voluntary scheme, but we encourage all our ringers to take part and build on their skills, and there are various levels that can be achieved. It has a systematic approach, so you go from one stage to the next in a logical sequence. And it's not competitive, but I think there's a lot of interest amongst the ringers as to how everyone's doing. The certificates at the top, those are Sheila's and mine's. These are just some of the booklets that we keep a record of. And the photograph in the bottom left shows Sue and Georgia having just received their learning the rope certificates for a couple of stages that they've been dealing with. We also enter striking competitions, and a striking competition is where each band of ringers rings the best it can to achieve as fewer faults as possible over a set piece. And we were lucky enough to, in 2018, to have won the competition, and this is the plaque that we were awarded for our efforts. It's important to say here that we're a team of ringers, we're a band of ringers, and although only 6 of us took part in the competition, all our ringers contributed to our success, because for weeks before, we were all practicing together so that we could do the best job that we can, and that teamwork paid off. The bottom logo here, the Ely Darson Association badge, is our membership to the local association. Again, that's a voluntary thing, but we're all members. The association supports us and gives us resources for maintenance, bell maintenance, teaching and training if we require it. It also arranges ringing events, meetings, and striking competitions. Our certificates aren't only awarded for our more serious side of ringing. On the right-hand side, you can see here a certificate awarded to Laura Nuttall's teddy bear in 2001, which was stuck in a tree for 18 months, having succumbed to a failed tower tumble when it parachuted from the tower but went into the tree instead of landing on the ground. And it eventually came down. So Sheila laundered it and took it back to Laura, and I presented her with this certificate. And Laura told us that it was in better condition when she got it back than when it went up into the tree. I've mentioned before about how technical ringing is. Here are some of the terms that we use, or you might hear in the tower. Some of the very common ones you'll hear is "that's all," "stand," "simulator" I've already mentioned, "Mexican wave," and all these. Ringing is full of jargon, as most activities are, I'm sure. And it's important that people understand this, and it can take quite a while, because when we're in the tower, we are just talking about this all the time, and it can be very confusing for people in the early stages. But eventually it gets through, and we're able to persuade people that this is how you've got to speak, otherwise we won't understand you. And generally speaking, it works. On the right-hand side is a typical diagram for some change ringing, and I mentioned change ringing just now. In the clip we saw, in the earlier clip we saw, the team were ringing chord changes where the conductor calls the changes, but in change ringing, the bells set off automatically into their changes, and the conductor doesn't call each change. And that is represented here. If you look at the top row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that represents the bells ringing in turn. And then when the method is started, every time the bells are pulled, they ring in a different order. So all these different rows are all different. Nothing is repeated. And if you join the dots up for each bell, you can see a line. So when we are learning to ring, we don't learn to ring the rows, we learn to ring a line. So we have to understand where we are ringing our bell amongst the others. I'm not going to say any more about that because it's quite complicated and you need to learn to ring. Here's some more of our team photos. We take a lot of photographs. Every opportunity we have, we're taking pictures. This is on the left-hand side is our group photo of our new logo that we designed early in 2020. We received all our clothing, but lockdown came along, so we didn't have time to have our group photo. So I asked everybody to take a selfie, and then I compiled this photograph of all of us. And then the other pictures are, you can see striking competition winners in 2018. That's the whole band. And this bottom left, Sue has just rung her first quarter peal in October 2019. So we invited them to our house to celebrate with cake and tea. And then on the right-hand side, we went on a small bell ringing outing locally in November 2019. So there's a picture for everything. Excuse me. And at this point, I mentioned the heritage of ringing. Ringing supports heritage and the culture of the country in a way. In using the bells, not only in our church, but in other churches, we're contributing to and supporting our communities as well as the church, and we're generating new ideas and outreach. Continued use of the bells generates work for the bell industry and craftsmen and women who maintain the fabric of our historic church buildings. Change ringing developed in the 17th century by Fabian Stedman, and this is his method, which I've just shown you. So we're talking about a lot of history and a lot of culture, and we want to continue to do that as long as we can, so that change ringing and bell ringing as a whole continues. The next step is to go into the clock room. So here we are, we've arrived another dozen or so steps up, and this is the top picture is roughly what you'd see when you go in there. This is a chiming apparatus. The clock is at the back there, and there are various other photographs. The clock was brought in 1683 by Thomas Power. It was built by Thomas Power in Stamford at a cost of £39, 12 shillings and 4 pence. And the chiming apparatus arrived at the same time. And there is a tradition that it was rejected at Stanford because it didn't play God Save the King. And indeed, with only 6 notes, it couldn't play God Save the King. The clock has an hour chime. It doesn't have a quarter chime, so it doesn't chime Westminster chimes, just chimes the hour. But every 3 hours, at 3 o'clock, 6, 9, and 12 o'clock, it operates the chiming apparatus, and we'll see that in a moment. There are 5 tunes on the apparatus: Nut Bells, Harvest Home, Nehemiah, Canaan, and Marlbrook. And they are changed by, I don't know whether you can see, there's a bar of levers there, and we just move the levers along a little bit and it changes the tune. And so fanatical are Sheila and I about bells and bell ringing that the tune Nut Bells we chose to give the name of our house. Here we can see the escapement of the clock on the right-hand side, and then in the lower picture there are various parts of the clock which have been used in the past, thankfully not thrown away, but restored and just kept as a display. And on the right-hand side, a selection of the clappers which could not be reused when we had the bells rehung in 2000. So this room, apart from being the clock room, is a small museum, really. When we designed it, we had to be very careful that the ropes, I hope you can see the ropes coming down there, didn't foul anything. They had to come clean through, straight up to the bells. So we had to design the clock room very carefully to make sure that happened. Soon we'll be going up to the belfry. But before we do that, we're just going to give you a clip of the clock and the chimes. This clip lasts about a minute, and hopefully you'll get an idea of how all that works. Just bear with me. There we go. Right, I hope you can see this. Right, we're now in the belfry, so we're the next floor up. Incidentally, the clock room, before we had the bells rehung, was empty, didn't have anything in it. And the clock was in this room. But we moved the bells down in 2000 when we had them rehung. And here they are, quite tightly squeezed in, as you can see from the top left-hand picture. As I've mentioned, we've got 6 bells, and this photograph shows very clearly, I hope, the different size of the bells. So on the bottom right-hand corner, you've got the tenor bell, the heaviest bell, which we call the tenor. That's the one which is 678 kilos. And next to it, here is the treble bell, which is the lightest bell. That's the one which is 219 kilos. So you've got number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. And the other pictures are other general views. The bottom right-hand photograph, looking above from the number 4 bell, you can't quite see it, but on the right-hand, the top quarter of the picture, there's a gangway, there's a walkway, which means that we can bring visitors up to have a look at the bells from there. And just as with the clock room, where we welcome visitors to come. We welcome people to come up here too, as long as it's a guided tour, and you're able to see what happens. The bells are a mixture. They were all originally cast by Brian Eldridge of Chertsey in Surrey in 1658. But over the centuries, some of them have cracked and had to be replaced. The most recent was our number 3 bell, which is top picture left-hand side. That's our new number 3 bell, which was cast in 2000 by the Whitechapel Bell Foundry. And Sheila and I had the privilege of being in the foundry when it was cast. So that was very exciting. Each bell has an inscription of the founder and the date, and more details of that can be found on our website. We're now going to see a video of the bells ringing. Now, this video is taken from the walkway when we had grey clappers. If we go back to that picture, you can see we've got red clappers. And this is going to illustrate the back 5 bells being rung. That's bells numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The bell in the foreground here, where you can see the bell rope, is in the down position. That means the mouth is face down. And I videoed this, and I'm in a position where it's safe to do so. So what I will say at this point is never go into a belfry, especially when the bells are in the upside down position, as these are, because they are very dangerous indeed. So this video is about a minute long. The sound quality is not very good, but you'll get the idea of how bells ring, and you'll see they turn counterclockwise. They don't all turn in the same direction. And they turn 360 degrees in one direction and then 360 degrees in the other. Okay, David. Right, I'm back. They were ringing, the bells were ringing rounds, what we call rounds, which is down the scale. So it doesn't matter how many bells you have. You could have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12. When they ring down the scale, they're known to be ringing rounds. I want to show you a little bit about muffles very briefly. I mentioned earlier ringing for remembrance and other morning events. When we ring for Remembrance Sunday, we put muffles on the clappers. The top left-hand photo here shows the muffles. And this photograph, second from the left, shows the muffle fitted to the clapper. So the effect is that the clapper hits the bell open on one stroke when the bell swings one way, and then when it swings the other way, it hits the bell against the muffle, so you get a quieter sound. And the third photograph here just illustrates the position of the clapper against the lip of the bell with the muffle on it. And in a moment, you'll be able to hear what that sounds like. But whilst on the subject of clappers, on the two right-hand photographs show the flight of the clapper. The flight is the conical shaped part of the clapper below the ball. And in our tower, and I think it's unique, we've been nutty enough to paint the ends of the clappers. And we've got the Cross of St. George on this one. And this one I did last year, which is the coat of arms for Lady Clare. And that is our connection with the college, of course. And I'll be painting the other clappers suitably when I find some coats of arms or some other insignia to use. So we're going to show two clips next. Our next two clips are of muffled bells. This first clip is about half a minute, and when we first got our muffles in 2014, we were keen to try them out. Obviously, you have to make sure everything works, and so I videoed this bell being rung with a muffle on it. We had black clappers in those days, much brighter now to have red. This bell is being rung up. Actually, it's being rung up into the upside down position. As I say, it's about half a minute ringing, and you can very clearly hear that one stroke is very loud and the next has got a muffled effect. And the next video after that, which will run on straight away, is of our ringing for the Service of Remembrance in 2019, and what the bells sound like from the ringing room when they're half muffled. And you'll notice a beautiful resonance. I love muffled ringing, half muffled ringing. It's very distinct, very distinctive, but you get a beautiful resonance from the bells. So we'll have a look at those videos now. Beautiful. I can't wait to get back in the tower. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It's lovely. Anyway, we finished with the new belfry and we're now getting towards the top of the tower. So this is the old belfry. Well, the old belfry is still there, but the bells aren't there anymore. Well, there is one bell left and we'll show you that in a moment. But this picture on the top left was taken from the hatch in the roof, which is the only way we can get onto the church roof, onto the tower roof, and we're looking down on the bells. So this bell here is the tenor bell, the heaviest bell, and the other bells are in the up position, the dangerous position, and the tenor bell is in the safe down position, which was the only way I could get up to take that photograph. and then a couple of another photograph there of the bells. You can see how different it is now to what it was pre-2000. And this old timber bell frame is dated 1658 and was beginning to move about. It was beginning to walk around the tower. You can see perhaps these big iron struts which were put into it to reinforce it. But there was quite a lot of movement in the bell frame, 3 or 4 millimeters. Now, 3 or 4 millimeters doesn't sound very much, but when the bells swing, they exert 4 times their weight vertically and twice horizontally, and that moves the frame and it makes the bells difficult to ring. But when we had the bells rehung, we weren't allowed to remove the bell frame because it was dated 1658 and it was an ancient artifact, and the church is a Grade 1 listed building and so on. So we had to move the bells downstairs, and that's how they became lower down in the tower. This photograph on the bottom left is the dismantling theme. There's a younger me there, and daughter Rebecca, and he's the bell hanger, and you can just see the bells behind us on the flatbed waiting to go to the foundry. And when they came back, we had to take a photograph of the new bell, of course, with Tower Captain Sheila proudly standing in front of it. You can just see on there AD 2000. There's always maintenance in these old buildings, and maintenance goes on today. So although we've got a brand new installation, we still need to make sure we're looking after it. So hence the reason that we have a steeple keeper, somebody to go and make sure everything's safe for use in the tower. One more photograph of this area. This is what the old belfry looks like now. So the bells have disappeared, except on the left-hand side, you can see a bell wheel, and then hiding underneath is our old number 3 bell, which we decided to keep, and we had our new number 3 bell cast, as I've mentioned before. We still use this old number 3 bell to chime 5 minutes before each service when we finished ringing the other bells. The only way into this room is through this hatch on the right-hand side, so it's a bit of a scramble. So we don't generally open this room up for tours to people because it's just difficult to get in and out of, although it's quite safe to walk in here with the boarding over the bell frame. And these are the louvres. And I have to go up there quite often to make sure that the birds haven't got in, or there's no other pests, because the birds getting in can make a lot of mess very quickly. We're getting towards the end of our tour now, and I just want to share with you some of the things we do apart from ringing. And these photographs give us an illustration of that. On the left-hand side, at the top, was 2019, our last major outing when we went to Leicestershire. We rang at 5 or 6 towers, and this is the group standing outside one of the towers. We always have a group photograph for the record. The middle picture was during lockdown last year, when we managed to go for pizza and beer at the Checkers in Gt Gransden. And I rather fancied that site, the flowers and the pub name. I do have pictures of pizza and beer, but they didn't come out very well. Perhaps it was too much beer, I don't know. On the right-hand side, I think it was 2016, we went to Durham for the weekend. We had a wonderful weekend. We rang at Durham Cathedral and other churches in the city and around about, and we had a lot of social time together. And this photograph was taken when we went to the museum at Beamish. Bottom left shows us at our Christmas party in 2018. We always have a Christmas party. Alas, in 2020 we didn't. Hopefully we will this year. And on the right-hand side, we're all a bit nutty about bells. This was in Abbottsley Church. We went to have a look at their bells, which are derelict and have been dismantled. And here's a photograph of several of us in the bell pit, looking up to the photographer. And the most poignant photograph, I suppose, is the one in the center at the bottom. I mentioned earlier that we were doing a lot of bell ringing on Zoom. And we meet on Zoom every week, twice a week, and in 2 groups. And once a fortnight, we all come together and have a chat. And this was the screenshot of our 100th team Zoom meeting when we celebrated with cake, homemade cake. It was a good occasion, but it's nothing like meeting together. So we're hoping that after lockdown, and very soon, we can get back together and see each other in person, which we haven't been able to do for such a long time. Our other, according to my notes, our other trips have included a visit to Elgood's Brewery in Wisbech. That was a good time as well. We're going to finish with some views from the top of the tower. Unfortunately, we can't take people to the top of the tower because the access is really very restrictive. But these are typically the sorts of things you would see. The top photograph is taken looking out over Little Gransden. You can see the church peeking through the trees and some of the properties in Little Gransden. And for those of you who know Gransden, at the bottom is the Dole Field there. Bottom left is looking out into Church Street, north of the tower, and middle at the bottom is looking directly down from the top of the tower, looking south. And then on the right is looking west, and in the middle and the upper pictures looking southwest, southwest. I want to finish with playing you a recording of the bells. And we've got a recording, thankfully we've got a recording of the bells in 1996, made with a reel-to-reel tape recorder outside the church. And it's followed immediately by a recording of the bells in 2014. It's about 1.5 minutes long. The sound quality for the first half isn't brilliant, but when we change into the second part, I hope you notice the change in tone. When we had the bells rehung, we had them retuned, and we had them tuned down from F sharp to F, approximately. And you can clearly hear that. And you can also hear how much brighter they are now than they were in 1996. So I'll now play that for you, I hope. Sorry. Sorry about that. There we are, ladies and gentlemen. We've completed the tour of the tower. We'll now go downstairs. We'll lock all the doors. We'll make sure the church is secure and everything's safe. And we look forward to going back next time. If you would like to know more information, please contact us on the email address. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you'd like to visit us on a Thursday when we're practicing again, and we're not quite sure when that's going to be, you'll be very welcome to do so. You're always assured of a warm welcome. And as you can see from the photograph on the right, the ringers are beaming out at you saying, please come along. But for the moment, thank you very much indeed for watching this presentation and joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you very much, Philip. Everybody can open their videos now if they wish.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see all the faces.
I've been talking to myself all evening, I think.
we have
thank you, Philip.
we have one or two things in the chat. One question from Sylvie. How does one tune a bell, and why did you decide to have them retuned?
Oh, well, how you tune a bell, in a moment, if I could perhaps find the photograph. No, I can't. I haven't got the photographs on this laptop. You tune a bell by turning it upside down and putting it on a turntable, basically upside down. It's a lathe, and you turn it upside down, and then so this is the bell upside down with its mouth facing upwards. Then you bring a cutting. You're rotating the bell on this turntable. You bring a cutting tool down, and you cut metal away from the part of the bell which is required to get the appropriate note from the bell. So you're just skimming metal off. When we saw the picture in the belfry with the bells up, I can show you that probably if I share again. You can see how bright the metal is in the bells. I'm just going to quickly whiz, if I can. I can show you this. There we go. So you should be able to see this. Can you see in the top left-hand picture, you've got, this is the tenor bell. You've got, it's very bright, but there you've got a dark, very dark band of metal. And the brightness is where they turned metal away from the bell. And they use tuning forks and oscilloscopes to know the tone of the bell and measure the frequencies, so they know exactly which part of the bell they need to take away in order to get the required note. That was how they tune a bell. What was the other part of the question?
Why did we have them retuned?
Oh, right. Well, we had them retuned because they sounded a bit honky-tonk in their original formats, because they were a mixture of bells. They weren't from one founder. If you buy a modern ring of bells nowadays, they're all in tune with one another, as well as the bell is in tune with itself, as well as all the other bells. If you buy from, when we're talking about a 17th century bell, bell casting wasn't such an exact science in those days, and they used to tune bells by chipping pieces of metal off them. So you get different quality of tone and note from the castings and also from the tuning. And the bell founder decided that they weren't sure they could tune old number three bell suitably, because they thought it was cracked, in fact. So we decided, well, we'll have a new bell and we'll have all the bells tuned up. I'm rather pleased we did, because I think they're much nicer sound now than they were in 1996.
Right, we have another question. Do ringers ever ring the bells fully muffled?
That could start a big debate amongst ringers, actually. It isn't traditional to do so, but I think some would say that they are rung fully muffled on the death of the monarch. But even then, you might leave the tenor, the heaviest bell, without a muffle at backstroke, at one of the strokes. But I think we are ready to ring fully muffled if we need to. We've got two sets of muffles. We'll wait until we have occasion to ring fully muffled to see if we actually do or not. But generally speaking, it's only half muffled ringing.
some towers do ring fully muffled on Good Friday, but in our case, we don't ring at all. We don't ring at all during Holy Week, which is from the Monday after Palm Sunday until Easter Day. That's our tradition. That's the tradition in lots of churches.
We also have a tradition of firing the bells on bonfire night, when we ring all the bells together in one cacophony. And it's quite difficult to do because it requires quite a lot of bell control so that we all strike instantaneously. And you get this wonderful cannon fire and all the bells are swinging in the right direction, and it fills me with joy. And I keep thinking the tower's going to fall down, and it never does. But it's wonderful. So we have that tradition on bonfire night when we fire the bells, and we do so for weddings as well.
Right, we have a comment from Sydney. Thank you for this presentation. We are in Berlin, and it was almost like having a little vacation in this year without travel. You mentioned how your church renovated the ringing room to make it more comfortable. Is this unusual or part of a more general move towards making ringers and ringing more visible and appreciated?
I think it's part of a more general move. Traditionally, ringers have put up with a lot because they're dedicated to ringing, and they've never been particularly worried about where they ring or how they ring or what the conditions are. It's usually one 60-watt bulb, a single bar heater, and a lot of dust and grime. But that was in the 60s. That was,
and the lawnmower.
And the lawnmower, which we often had to move out of the tower before we started to ring. But what we're trying to do now is we're trying to encourage people to come ringing, because ringing is a tremendous activity. It's good for your mental health. It's good for your physical health as well. And we want to welcome people and realize that it's 300, you know, it's a 17th century activity, but we're doing it in the 21st century, and we are modern people, hence the computer and the sensors and the comfortable surroundings. So it is more of a trend now to welcome people, and I'm always encouraging tower captains to spruce up their tower. And we're so used nowadays to central heating and lighting and all mod cons, we've got to try and replicate that in the tower so that people say, we're going ringing. We know it's going to be comfortable. Even if it's cold outside, we're going to be warm and comfortable. And then we can go down the pub.
I think that's all the questions we've got in the chat box. Has anybody else got a question they would like to raise to Philip or myself?
All questions welcome. Every question can be answered. There's no question that we cannot answer about bells and bell ringing.
For the uninitiated, Philip, what is the age range of bell ringers?
Thank you, Jeff. Good question, Jeff. Yes, well, we would say from about 10 years old to whenever. Yeah, to death. Realistically, because we're talking about heavy swinging around heavy metal, bell ringing is the original heavy metal, let's face it. So you have to be taught properly, and you have to be strong enough to ring. But we would say, in our case, from about 10 years old, and up till 70, 80, though it does become more difficult to learn as an adult, because adults tend to overthink things and so on. Children and youngsters, they just absorb it all and they just suck it all in. One of our ringers, was the one who pointed out how technical bell ringing is. I'd always taken it for granted because I learned as a teenager. And it is a technical activity, but you start at the very beginning. You start by understanding what the bell does, what it looks like, what the rope feels like, and you start at the very beginning and gradually build on your knowledge and experience until you become a change ringer. And in our tower, that can start from about the age of 10. It can take a little while to learn, but we have a lot of fun on the way. If you're ringing in a very light ring of bells, say a 300 or 400 weights ring of bells, then you can you can learn when you're a bit younger than that.
In our tower, the ages of our band range from 20 to 17 something.
70, 20 to 70, yeah.
70
yeah.
plus.
But you see, I mentioned earlier about us being a team. It's a very inclusive thing. It transcends all ages, all abilities, and all professions. Everybody is welcome because we're all focused on that one objective of ringing church bells and making a wonderful sound and learning as we're going along. So try it. It's great. If you can't try it here, try it wherever you live.
Well, thank you. It certainly backs out my experience, because the youngest ringer I've known was a 6-year-old, the oldest is 100.
Oh, right. That's quite a range.
Yes, but 10 to 90, I'd say, is the more usual.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've had another question. Are you using only traditional compositions, or do you compose new pieces as well?
Yeah, who's that from? Anybody I know?
No, it's from Rolf.
Okay, yeah, we do. We do use traditional compositions a lot in our practicing and Sunday service ringing. But for some particular quarter peals, I will compose particular touches. A piece of ringing is called a touch. So you might say to somebody, will you call a touch of such and such? And they'll know what you're talking about. So I will compose a touch, a quarter peal, which is about 1250 changes, and it lasts about 45 minutes. And it'll depend on what we need, but sometimes I will compose something. For the last 25 years, we've rung a date touch on the 1st of January every year. A date touch is the year date number of changes. So, and the last one we rang was 2020? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that was the 25th New Year's Day date touch we'd rung, actually. Not quite the 25th consecutive one, but 25th. And I had to compose a special touch for that to make it fit so that we could get 2020 changes. So I do compose a particular thing. I composed an 1860 for Nelson's death. It was 1860, and I compose other things as well. But overall, we use conventional, traditional touches, which most ringers will be familiar with. It's quite mathematical, but it's not arithmetic. I'll shut up.
Any more questions? Anybody else? Any of our ringers want to add anything?
Yeah.
What's Philip missed out?
All the photographs I've taken, I haven't been able to show.
No.
Okay, that's fine.
Oh, I'd like to say thank you.
Stephen's waving.
Oh, Stephen's waving. Right. Unmute yourself then, Stephen.
It's not really a question, but you haven't mentioned the connection with handbell ringing. We know that you and Sheila are probably the ultimate handbell ringers.
Well, we do ring handbells. Now, most people will think of handbells traditionally as tune ringing on handbells, and there's some magnificent handbell orchestras in the world, and with sets of several octaves, and produce some magnificent sound in tunes. We used to ring tunes on our handbells, and we're members of the Handbell Ringers of Great Britain. We were members of the Handbell Ringers of Great Britain, but we don't ring tunes anymore. We ring changes, and we are able to ring changes, of course, but focus in the tower is in tower bell ringing. Handbell ringing has become more popular in the last year because of virtual ringing, and a lot of people have learned to ring handbells virtually on the computer via Zoom. and some people have bought their own handbells, but they don't quite go hand in hand. Excuse the pun. The technique is slightly different, but we do ring changes on handbells as well. And the tower does have a set of handbells which it uses occasionally for ringing tunes. But it's an interesting point. Sheila is just retrieving the E handbells. So this is what a handbell looks like, but these are electronic ones. But that's typically what a handbell looks like.
No clappers.
No clappers, and you just wiggle them up and down, and you ring with the you ring with the same program as we ring with the SIM in the tower, Able, and you can ring handbells. But in handbell ringing, each ringer rings 2 bells, whereas in the tower, each ringer rings 1 bell.
Philip also has a set of 8 handbells, which we had cast by the Whitechapel Bell Foundry before they went out of business, which are inscribed nut bells. They are called a pocket set, and they are quite small because a pocket set was produced for men to put in their pockets when they were in the trenches during World War I.
This is the smallest one.
These were cast when, Philip?
2014.
14.
Yeah. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've inscribed them with the date and nut bells. And here are the tenors. So they're a beautiful sound. These were cast in Whitechapel in London, and they don't cast bells anymore.
Somebody says, oh yeah, we did ring handbells for the carol service out by the Lich Gate, if anybody came to the services.
We did indeed, yeah. We were going to ring tower bells for Christmas, but we decided that the infection rate was so high, we opted out of doing that. But we rang handbells at the Lich Gate for the 2 carol services.
Mm.
Okay, Stephen.
Thank you.
Sylvie.
Is Loughborough the only place in Britain now that casts bells?
Yeah, there is another company that's taken over from Whitechapel, Wesley, I think it's called. But Loughborough is the main foundry now, and I believe it's just received a grant for improvement
museum
work. Yeah, we've been there. The ringers have been to Loughborough, and we rang on the campanile there. It's called a campanile. It's a ring of 12 now. 10, is it?
10.
Yeah, 10. And we had a tour of the museum. We had a tour of the foundry. And so I think when lockdown is finished, they'll start tours again. So I can recommend to anybody who's watching, if you get the opportunity to go to the Bell Foundry at Loughborough, then do so. It's fascinating.
Sydney from Berlin.
Hello, Sydney.
Says, we hope that if you ring for the end of the pandemic, you will transmit it so we can hear it in Berlin.
Oh, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? I don't think we can do that, but thank you very much for that thought. Keep tuning in to our Facebook page and website and so on. Sometimes we put clips of our ringing on there. Or right. if you look at my YouTube account, which is called Nut Bells, sadly, there are various clips of bell ringing on my YouTube account, Nut Bells.
Right, David, would you like to round us up? And finish?
Thank you very much, Philip and Sheila, just firstly for arranging this evening. It's been absolutely great. As usual, it feels like I'm a bit close to the tower already. I'm just looking forward to the time when we can all get back in there and ring them in earnest. It'll be just tremendous to look forward to. I do like the idea of a broadcasting one. I think that would be good fun, wouldn't it?
It would be.
We should investigate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Thank you very much, everyone, for attending as well. I hope you've learned a bit about bell ringing in the tower, and it's whetted your appetite to come and give it a try in real life. Yeah, you're always very welcome to come to Gransden to ring at any time you're in the area. If you don't live around here, I'm sure your local towers also would be very happy to welcome you along for a tour and some training in bell ringing. It really is great fun, and I think the enthusiasm you see from Philip and Sheila after 50 years of doing it is unabated. There's more still to come yet, I'm sure. So we will keep learning and we'll keep trying to improve all the time. It's tremendous fun. Thank you, Philip and Sheila, for this evening, and thank you for all the training and the work you put into the tower in general. It's really much appreciated.